This week on Information Technology Leaders, Sally McKenzie, Vice President for Eddie Bauer's Interactive Media Division. Now here's our host, Laura Schildkraut.
Today's guest is the Vice President for Eddie Bauer's Interactive Media Division. She started her career as a salesperson in a clothing store, and through a series of twists and turns, she now finds herself responsible for the content, design, and strategic direction of a highly successful website. Both her educational background and her career contain unfortunate surprises, but each was followed by less traditional opportunities, which she had the good judgment to grasp. There was no plan, but the outcome has been stellar. A great lesson for all of us. Please welcome Sally McKenzie. Tell me where you grew up.
I grew up in Oak Harbor, Washington, on Whidbey Island, about 2 hours north of here. My father was a Navy pilot.
So by one definition, you could sort of be considered a Navy brat, but you didn't have the typical upbringing of a child where the father is bringing the family from one place to another because of sort of a commitment that your parents made. Right. Was that a good decision? And could you tell us about that
Well, it was
commitment?
good for me, and I hope my parents would feel the same way. Unlike a lot of Navy kids that got bounced around from school to school and town to town, my parents really made the decision that we needed to be in a stable place, and we all loved Oak Harbor, so it was really a situation where my father would go off to sea or off to another base, and my mom and my sister and I would pretty much stay put, which was a great thing for me because with the exception of one move that we made when I was a teenager, we moved to San Diego for a couple of years. But aside from that, I really had a very stable upbringing with stable friends all through my whole childhood.
Which is kind of nice.
It was great, yeah, it was great for me.
A lot of your Navy peers wouldn't have that.
It was a big sacrifice for my parents, obviously.
Right.
But it was really nice for my sister and I.
First lesson about trade-offs, isn't it?
Right, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
What were you like in high school?
Oh, I've tried most of my life trying to forget high school, actually, but high school was fun. I was pretty academically oriented. I was not the typical, cheerleader, socialite kind of kid at all. I was involved in a lot of community theater, took piano lessons, loved reading, really loved academic pursuits. I had great teachers. I was friends with a lot of my teachers. Just really enjoyed school.
How did you initially decide what college you would attend?
That was kind of an interesting story. I had actually hoped to go to college in Washington State, but the year that I was graduating from high school, my dad actually got sent to the Pentagon, and I decided that my first year outside of high school, I really wanted to be closer to my family. So I started looking for colleges on the East Coast, and I had planned on attending Temple University. And my parents and I went to visit Temple University shortly before school was about to start.
Because you'd already accepted.
I'd already accepted,
right.
Yeah. And it was in a pretty rough neighborhood, to say the least. And at the time, it just really was not the kind of environment I wanted to put myself into, and I think my parents definitely agreed with that. So we started looking for other options, and in fact, on the way home from our visit to Temple, swung by the eastern shore of Maryland to Washington College, which is a place that I had investigated but had not actually applied to. And here was this beautiful, idyllic, ivy-covered, small, peaceful college campus, and it just sort of struck a chord with me, and that's where I wound up going.
Do you remember why you had decided not to apply there?
I don't really remember, except perhaps that I wanted to pursue theater, and I think at the time I probably thought that being at a larger school in a more urban setting might give me more opportunities, but that's really all I can remember at the time. Yeah.
And what did you end up majoring in?
Theater with a minor in English.
Did you ever try and pursue a career in acting?
No, I really didn't. I did a lot of community theater before college. I participated in theater really very actively all through my college career. And I think perhaps at one time I really thought that that was something that I would want to do, but in the end I think the lifestyle choices that you make in a career like that would probably have not been too compatible
Like what?
with me. I think just the traveling around a lot, the lack of stability in terms of where your next job is coming from and that kind of thing. It was a fun lifestyle to lead when you don't have to worry about the responsibilities of everyday life, but when you do, it's not quite so much fun.
So what did you do right after college?
Made a few mistakes. I actually got married right after school, and that wound up being not a successful thing for me. The marriage lasted 2.5, 3 years at the most. And my husband at the time and I decided that we really wanted to stay close to the college because we still had a lot of friends there and we loved the Eastern Shore lifestyle. But this was 1982, and the economy was certainly not what it is today. Unemployment was somewhere in the neighborhood of 12%. College graduates, liberal arts college graduates at that, with a theater degree at that, were not particularly marketable. So we stuck close to home. I got a job in a small mom and pop clothing store, and they were great to me. They let me decorate the windows and check in inventory, and I learned a lot about retail in the process. But it was really, it was a minimum wage job. That's essentially what it was. So we stayed there for a year or two, and then wound up moving to Florida, which was where his family was from. And I started working in a department store and gradually moved into assistant buying capabilities from there.
How did the move to assistant buying come about?
I was working in a department store, and one of the women that I worked with there had left the department store to go work in a buying office for Jefferson Ward, which was a subsidiary of Montgomery Ward. And she called me a month or two after she got there and said, hey, we have some openings here. You might really enjoy this line of work. And one thing led to another, and here I went.
So she was sort of your first mentor, in a way.
I think you could say so. Yeah, she was.
And did you like the work in the buying office?
I did. It was really a lot of fun. I think I felt there that I could really use a little bit more of my intellect there, perhaps. Working with a customer is a great thing, but it's a tiring life. The hours are very unstable. You're on your feet all day long. You're dealing with people in sometimes not so pleasant circumstances.
And you always have to be nice to them.
Yeah, exactly. And it was really nice to get into more of a stable environment of more of a Monday through Friday sort of situation, which was good at the time because that was the kind of atmosphere my husband was in. So we had a little bit more stability in our personal life that way. And I just found that it was really exciting being involved in retail on that side. So I liked it.
But yet you decided to leave Florida anyway.
We did.
Yes.
Jefferson Ward went out of business shortly after I got there. I think I was there maybe 1.5 years, 2 years total, and it was sort of a time to reassess. Clearly, the marriage was not going well. Although I think at that time I was not necessarily ready to admit that. My husband was not particularly happy with his job. I didn't like Florida at all. He liked it, but I didn't. And we decided that maybe a change was a good thing. And we came out to Seattle on vacation to see my family, and I started poking around in the Seattle job market, and through a connection of mine in Florida, set up an interview with the Bauer, and they offered me an assistant buying job, and it was just a great opportunity to move and get back to where I really wanted to be.
And was that assistant buying position similar to the other one?
So it was similar. It was I think it was in the towels and bath shop area, and I had been in the small appliances, housewares area, so it was similar sorts of product and similar work.
Did you find that the companies were different?
The companies were very different, and I think that was a good thing for me in my career. Jefferson Ward had been, unfortunately, fairly poorly managed for a long time, and it was a fun place to work, but not particularly disciplined. And the training that I went through there was, well, it was very much an on-the-job sort of situation. You learned as you went, and you hoped that you had a good teacher. The Bauer was a much more rigorous atmosphere, much more disciplined, very formalized training process, which was really good because coming from a background that was not really business or retail oriented, I needed that training. Even though I'd had a few years in the business world, I really needed somebody to teach me the right way to do things, and so it was a good thing for me.
And what was going on in your personal life at this time?
I think it was pretty clear that the marriage was not going to work out, and I was back in a situation where I was close to my family and felt like I had a good support system, and it was really time to move on. I think fairly shortly, probably a good maybe 6 months after we got to Seattle, we decided to go our separate ways.
Yeah. You sort of had described that situation as painless as it could have been under the circumstances, but you had also told me that there were some signs that you probably should have seen way, way early on that you had just ignored. I know a lot of our students are probably in that situation where they're trying to make some of those decisions. Right. What are some of those signs?
Well, I think that the thing that I would probably say is that getting along in a idyllic college situation was not particularly an issue for us, but getting along in real life clearly was. And there's a lot of life that needs to be figured out when you first get out of school. And I think that I might have been better off doing that figuring out by myself, and so would have he. So would have he. But you know, in the end, when I look back on it, it was a brief 3 or so years out of my life. There were no children involved. We certainly didn't have any money or property to fight about, so it was really just a parting of the ways. And I don't think of it really as even a big deal anymore. At the time it was.
Yeah. And then you left the Bond and moved to J. Jacobs. How did that move come about?
I think that came about through a contact friend of a friend situation. I think it was actually a sister of one of my parents' friends worked there, and we got to know each other on a social situation and heard about the job opening that way. So it was just a connection. But it seemed like at the time it would be a really exciting place to work. I was getting kind of ready for a change, I think.
And what were your responsibilities there?
I started out as an assistant buyer and then was fairly quickly promoted to buyer.
And did you enjoy that?
I did. Yeah, it was great. It was really a chance to run a business. I'd spent a lot of time at the assistant level really executing someone else's plans, and it was a chance for me to really spread my wings a little bit and try it myself. And it was also the first time that I really had the opportunity to travel for my job, and it was a lot of travel actually. It was about twice a month. There was either a New York trip or a Los Angeles buying trip. And at the time, you know, being young and single and that kind of thing, it was great. It was a chance to see the world a little bit, and it was a fun atmosphere to work in.
Did that increased level of responsibility ever sort of scare you, or did it just invigorate you?
I think it scared me before I got it. Once I got it, it invigorated me. I had been an assistant for a while, and I think that I was beginning to think, well, I'm either going to get to the next level in this business or I'm going to find a completely new career. And when the opportunity presented itself, it was like, well, okay, you owe it to yourself to go for this a little bit and see if you can do it. And I wound up actually that first year being very successful and running a really good business. And I realized, wow, I really do like doing this. So
and I'm kind of good at it,
yeah,
which is always sort of helps you like something. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, you didn't stay there terribly long, and you then moved to Eddie Bauer. How did that move come about?
Again, through a connection. One of the women that I worked with at J. Jacobs moved to Eddie Bauer, and shortly after she got there, she said, you know, there's kind of a unique situation going on here. There's a relatively new division that's looking for people that have some liquidation experience, and I was actually a buyer in the more budget division of J. Jacobs, and went over there and interviewed, really liked the atmosphere, loved the people, and wasn't crazy about the bridge commute because I was living downtown, but other than that, there was really no reason at all not to take the opportunity. It was great. So.
But also a really good lesson about networking. This is probably the fourth job that you've gotten through a contact rather than through looking at ads in the paper or
pounding the pavement yourself.
Yeah, going the traditional route. So that's also a really good lesson. What was the division that you worked in?
I was brought in to be part of the outlet division of Eddie Bauer. Eddie Bauer actually has a chain of 45 plus, I'm not sure of the exact number now, outlet stores that were originally constructed to take care of the excess of Eddie Bauer's inventory, catalog product that didn't sell, retail product that needed to get off the floor into a location for liquidation. And I was brought on along with one other person to really start growing the outlet business rather aggressively. And instead of just carrying inventory that was to be liquidated, we were actually just brought on to start looking into purchasing inventory for the outlet stores to round out the inventory, bring in basic t-shirts, basic jeans, that sort of thing. It was a great job, very entrepreneurial, just a really terrific division to be a part of, and a lot of growth and a lot of really good opportunity.
It sounds like when you were talking about the Bond experience, you really liked the structure there because it gave you some of that background and that underpinning, and now you talk about an entrepreneurial spirit. Did you eventually find that that was a better fit for you?
Definitely. I think that I needed to have the basis and the background of the discipline, but what I really wanted to do is take that knowledge and use it in my own way.
Okay. So how were you affected by the division's growth?
It was a wild ride. It was absolutely great. I had just an incredible time. A great group of people, really built the business successfully, and it was probably among the happiest I had been in my career to that point. Just the whole culture of Eddie Bauer, the whole they just kept opening doors for me. I mean, it was just one of those situations where I could grow along with my business, and I kept learning, and it was just a really great situation for me. After about 6 or so years there, 6.5 years, kind of an interesting thing happened. I think I got to a point in my career development where I was beginning to feel like, okay, I'm either ready for the next level or ready for the next challenge. And right around that same time, the company was kind of in a crux with what to do with the outlet business. And given the circumstances at the time, the philosophy was to slow the growth down of that division a little bit. They weren't really sure whether it was going to start cannibalizing the regular business. Do we really want to take this whole outlet thing to the next level? And the whole outlet boom that had been happening in retail was starting to slow down a little bit. So I sort of found myself at a place where I was happy and contented, certainly, but really kind of itching for that next thing.
I remember you're saying that it was clear that the person above you wasn't going to leave and probably like wasn't going to die anytime soon. So
Exactly,
you really kind of
yeah.
had to take matters into your own hands.
Mm-hmm.
Was that, given that this was sort of the first really happy, successful job that you've had, was that a difficult decision to start looking to leave that division?
Yeah, it was. It was, because for me there were so many things about it that were still good, and I think that everyone in life, you know, we tend to all gravitate towards the familiar, regardless of how exciting what's unfamiliar might be. And I think that I was in some way kind of locked and married to this. Oh, but I like it here. I have friends in this division. I know that it's different in other divisions of the company, sort of thing. And it was hard for me to really build up that impetus to say, you know, it's really time for the good of the division and for the good of me, for me to move on.
Did it take you a while from the time you made that decision until you found what you thought was going to be the right spot?
I would say, I think it was more something that was just sort of going on in the back of my mind for maybe 6 months to a year, that, you know, maybe I've gotten to the point where it's time for something different.
And then how did the role in product sourcing come about?
Eddie Bauer was forming a new division to handle the sourcing of product, and because I had been involved in sourcing product very aggressively in my role in outlets, it seemed to me like it would be a good fit. That, hey, this is a new thing. I enjoyed the travel, enjoyed working with the factories, and it seemed like it might be the answer for me. It was unfortunately fairly obvious to me after about 2 or 3 weeks in the division that it wasn't the right answer for me, and then I needed to start the course correction process.
Can you back up a second and tell us what product sourcing is and what that division was responsible for?
Sure. Product sourcing is responsible for actually getting garments constructed and made. Eddie Bauer is a private label company, so we don't go to manufacturers to buy products. We actually go directly to factories to buy the product. So the sourcing manager's role really is to take the garment specifications that are put together by the design department and ordered by the merchants and find appropriate factories to make the quality and on-time delivery and cost that the company needs.
Because we just feel like it all just falls from the sky.
Right,
and
it grows
ends
on
up,
trees
and ends up in the
yeah.
store, right?
Yeah.
And pick them.
Yeah.
So during that time, you sort of learned that you were a generalist at heart. And how did that fit with the sourcing role?
Not particularly well. It was very clear that I was expected to be a specialist that had a very clear area of responsibility that started and ended. And I think that that was probably the one thing that was the most difficult about it for me. That business makes sense to me when I can see all of it and I can see how all of the pieces interconnect, and the relationships from division to division always mean a lot to me. And to be responsible for sourcing a particular pant in a large quantity at a certain price might be a good challenge in and of itself for a lot of people. For me, I had a hard time understanding why I would need to be doing this if I couldn't see the business that was surrounding it. And I just found that to be a very frustrating situation. I felt like I was really removed from making business happen.
Did they shut down business decisions and not let you know what was going on, or was it just not part of the personality of the division?
It just really wasn't part of the job. It was really difficult to be as involved with the factories as you needed to be to get things done, and really at the same time have a broad scope understanding of what was going on with the business. So it was even though it was not necessarily an isolating role, and that you certainly had interaction with people in other aspects of the business, your area of responsibility was pretty siloed.
Yeah. So your original plan was to sort of tough it out and become good at it, but you decided not to go with the original plan and to just get out.
Yeah, I gave it a good try. I would say I was probably there maybe 60, close to 90 days by the time it was finished. And instead of getting better, for me it actually got worse, to the point where it was really just not a pleasurable thing to get up in the morning and go to work. And I think if I had seen a light at the end of the tunnel where it was going to get a whole lot better once I got past this particular hurdle, or if I had seen another position at Eddie Bauer that I knew was the right one for me, I probably would have toughed it out or made the decision to stay or tried to steer my career in a little bit different direction. But I think that unfortunately at that point I was pretty frustrated and really didn't know what I wanted to do. Because other people in the division were really enjoying the job and thought that it was just a great place to be. It was just a bad fit. It was a bad fit for Sally. So it was a very difficult decision for me to make and very emotional at the time, I recall. But I made the decision to leave the company because I just didn't know what the answer was. And I figured that as long as I was working, as hard as I was working, there was no way I was going to have the time to take the step back, really assess what I'd done in my career so far and where I wanted to go. So unfortunately, I made the decision to leave.
So you didn't look around at other places within Eddie Bauer?
No, Eddie Bauer was great to me through this whole thing. In fact, they said, is there another position we can offer you? And is there some help we can give you to help you through this? And at the time, I think I was just so confused by not really knowing. I really didn't know why it wasn't working. I can tell you why it wasn't working now,
right.
But at the time, I was too caught up in it. I didn't have the distance to be able to do that. So I really just said, you know, if I could tell you what the position was, I would, but I just don't know. And I knew I needed a break at that point.
And then what did Eddie Bauer do when you finally decided to leave? How did they handle that?
It was an absolutely wonderful transition. They really couldn't have been nicer about it. In fact, what they offered me instead of actually just departing from the company was a leave of absence, which was really just a nice transition and a nice way of leaving the door open, a chance for me to potentially come back if I figured things out and decided that I really did want to. So it was a great thing for me.
So it sounds like you almost thought you were falling apart, but they still thought that you were pretty valuable, which is a pretty handy thing.
I think so. Yeah.
Well, they wouldn't have done that if they hadn't. They would have said,
yeah.
she's done.
Yeah.
Let's forget it. So you did leave Eddie Bauer. What did you do during your hiatus?
I read about 18 books, and I started exercising again, and I cooked wonderful meals for my husband and I, and it was a lovely time. I purposely said that I was not going to look for a job for at least 3 months, and it was a good thing because I think I left in September or October, so that gave me through the holiday time period, and I think I actually enjoyed the holidays for the first time as a retailer, so that was really nice. After about 3 months or so, I will say that I began to feel kind of isolated. It's wonderful to have that much free time, but when your spouse doesn't have that free time with you and all of your friends are caught up in work, you start to really feel like, wow, there's a whole world going on that I'm not participating in. And it came time to start to look for a job.
But you also did some career counseling during this time.
What I really wanted to do was to not make another mistake like the mistake I had made in going to sourcing. And number one, I didn't feel I could afford it. Number two, I certainly wasn't in my 20s anymore where it's perfectly okay to bounce around a little bit. It was time to give myself that stability and really approach my career in a more directed way. So I did go and get some career counseling just for a couple of sessions, and it was a really great experience. They put me through the whole litany of 45 tests that tell you whether you'd be good at Russian or whether you'd be a good nurse and all that kind of thing. And in the end, I would have to say I didn't necessarily learn anything about myself that I didn't already know or suspect, but it gave me the toolkit with which to work so that I understood these are the 2 or 3 things I absolutely positively have to have in a job to be happy. These are the 3 or 4 things that I'd like, but those are negotiable. So I was able then to really go into the job market or start to even think about where I wanted to go, knowing what was really the most important thing to me. And it became very clear almost instantly why it hadn't worked in sourcing, why it had been so good in outlets, and why I really was ready to move on. And it just really made the whole process that much more validating and easier for me.
What were some of the things that you learned that you had to have, and what were some of the things that you learned that didn't work?
I learned that I actually really liked having a lot of responsibility. And the thing that was interesting is when I first quit and took some time off, I can remember my husband and I talking and saying, why don't you just find something that's not so strenuous? Why don't you just find something, fairly easy? You don't need to make this much money, it's okay. And really what came out of all those tests was that I really liked working a lot, that I liked being driven by my career and driving my career. I really enjoyed that piece, so that was a good thing. it also came out that I really needed some level of independence, that I needed to be in an atmosphere where I could make decisions, I could call shots, and I could not necessarily be the one in charge all the time, but I needed to have a certain level of decision-making responsibility, and an element of creativity, that I was good at things when they were in startup mode, when I could really sort of use that entrepreneurial spirit.
It sounds like it also helped you rebuild your confidence.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah,
I was pretty shaken up by that whole experience.
It does. I think when you've been successful all along, I know that happened to me sort of very early on in my career, where you just completely start shaking your confidence about who you are and what you're capable of, and if I couldn't fix this, how will I know I'll be able to fix the next one?
I think you're absolutely right. I can remember feeling when I left, my confidence was clearly shaken. I think I felt that because I didn't like to do it, that I couldn't do it, and that's not necessarily the case.
What made you respond to the greatfoods.com ad when you saw it? The first time you ever responded to an ad in the paper, pretty much.
I think it was. I had gone through the career counseling, decided that that it was time to look for a job, and I was really pretty wide open. What I had learned was that retail was not at all a bad choice for me, and Amazon was in existence then, but was certainly not a public company and not a household word. This whole doing business on the internet was really just starting to bubble as kind of the next new thing. And that next new thing has always been exciting to me. When the outlet business was just getting going, that was very exciting. So there was an intellectual interest there, clearly. And as I think I mentioned, I have a real interest in the food and cooking thing. So I noticed this little ad for someone to help run an online gourmet food company, and responded to it just thinking, well, maybe something will come out of it, maybe something won't. And wound up going in for an interview, and it was probably the least lucrative situation I ever could have gotten myself into. But at the time, that really didn't matter to me, and that's a good thing, because it really was almost like going back to school. It was very, very small company. Literally, the gentleman who started the company and his wife started it in the basement of their house. They both moved on to other jobs, and they really needed somebody on a day in, day out basis just to run it, to do the customer service, the marketing, the merchandising of the site. And he took care of the technical details on the weekends when he had time. So I was kind of a one-man band. The office parties were a little dull. But I learned so much. I was really, truly a pioneer, I think, at that point in doing business online, because very few companies were really up and running with websites at that point, and had a fabulous time.
You also realized that you weren't particularly technology savvy.
Oh, no.
So what were some of the things that you started doing to get yourself up to speed?
Well, I think it was really just one of those things where sort of a baptism by fire kind of thing. I was pretty much put in an office with a computer and a T1 connection and said, here you go, And I had used Word and Excel and some very basic programs, but really had not been exposed to doing my whole business on a computer screen before. And fortunately, the gentleman I worked for was a good teacher and was very patient with me, and would show me a few things in the morning and say, okay, see if you can get to here, and I'll be back at 5 o'clock. And it was a very self-taught sort of situation, which was actually really good, because all of the embarrassing moments nobody else had to see, which was good. But I realized that I just absolutely loved it and had a fairly good aptitude for it. It's just something I had never really been exposed to before.
So what were some of the things that you learned beyond Word and Excel and getting past those?
Well, I think that the main thing I learned was just how to do business with a customer without human interaction. And that was one of the things that I think that's one of the things that's always the hardest for anybody getting started on the internet, is that you really have to think through what you need to tell the customer and how you need to get them from place to place without a physical person, either in a store or on the phone, being able to help them. And I can't say that I became a technical whiz or anything like that, but I was able to at least communicate what was needed to a technical person so that things would come out the right way and the customer would be serviced. And I think that was the biggest thing that I learned.
And a pretty important leap for later. What did you feel about the level of solitude that you experienced in that job?
There were days that I really loved it, but one of the things that had come out of all of my career counseling and testing was that I needed a pretty good mix of being isolated and working with people. That if I was in a situation where I had to work around lots and lots of people all the time, I tended to get kind of tired and frustrated. If I was in a situation where I was completely isolated all the time, I wasn't necessarily the most energized or motivated. What I really needed to do was have time to be by myself and work on things, and then be able to get together as a group and interact. And that group interaction piece was sort of taken away. I did work very closely with the owner, usually at least an hour or two every day, and spent a lot of time on the phone with business colleagues and that kind of thing. But it was a little on the isolating side. I was ready to go back to a more traditional office environment. Yeah.
And then Eddie Bauer came a-calling.
Or I came a-calling them. I can't quite remember the way it happened. But Eddie Bauer had gotten their website up and running in 1996, and at the time it was a very small team of a couple of technical people and the woman who started the whole thing. And she was actually the person who originally brought me to Bauer back in the early 90s. And the web business was growing enough that they felt they could bring on a part-time merchant, about 30 hours a week. And it was one of those just odd fall out of the sky sorts of situations where what I had been doing and what they wanted, plus my knowledge of Bauer, was just sort of that perfect marriage of this would be a great opportunity. So going back at 30 hours a week was actually wonderful. That's a lovely number of hours to work in a week, if anybody ever wonders. And it was a chance to take the things that I had learned and come back to a company with all of the other wonderful things that Bauer has to offer. And the part-time piece of it didn't last very long. I was more than full-time before I could even really get my feet wet. So
when you left Bauer, they were very supportive. How was this guy when you told him you were leaving his company?
In the end, he was very supportive. I think it was difficult for him, and honestly, it was difficult for me in that I think when you deal with someone who truly is an entrepreneur, I mean, I've talked about having an entrepreneurial spirit, but I've never started my own business from ground zero. Clearly, that it was a different situation for him. This was his whole life's passion, and when someone tells you that they're moving on, I think there's a tendency to feel that this person doesn't believe in my wonderful idea and in my wonderful dream, and that really wasn't the case. It was really, for me, more of a matter of personal choice and practicality in my life. And we wound up, being good friends, and I stayed on and helped him for as long as I could and stayed in touch until he had found somebody to make the transition. So it wound up being fine.
But not right off the bat.
Not right off the bat.
So you found that now you've got this role, which your entrepreneurial spirit and your generalist spirit worked really well, especially matched with this new technical understanding and some .com background.
Right.
Can you explain what that role sort of evolved into, sort of where you are now?
Sure. As I said, it started out as about a 30-hour-a-week position, and I reported into the interactive media division, but I actually sat with the merchants. So it gave them the confidence that there was somebody that was sitting right there who could really interpret all of their product ideas and product knowledge onto the website. And in the beginning, it was a pretty rudimentary situation. It was coming in, working with a website that had really never had any formal merchandising done on it, setting up categories and subcategories of product that would make sense to a customer, doing some very basic, let's try a feature product, let's sell, cross-selling a customer on this, just sort of, it was really retail 101 online kind of thing. And that really didn't take a particularly long period of time, but because the business was just growing at such a rapid rate, and there were just so many opportunities, the job very quickly turned full-time. I then brought on a part-time assistant. I think I was promoted shortly after that, and brought on some additional people. The team that I supervise today is, I think it's 18 or 19 people, and that's all happened in the course of about 2 years. We went from one-man band to 18 people, so it's been very, very rapid growth. And the team that I oversee today is really divided into 3 key functional areas. There's a team that handles operations and production, which is really the day in, day out, getting product on the site and maintaining that product, from the copywriting to photo coordination to data coordination. There's another team that's really a team of store managers, online store managers, that are doing what I did in the merchandising function, only at a much more sophisticated level, of course, than I was. And they're selecting products to be featured, really interpreting our major product statements and stories for online, putting content plans together, that sort of thing. And then a third area is business development, which is really evolving site functionality as we need to support our key product messages, coming up with new technology tools, 3D tools, that kind of thing.
I may just sort of be projecting my own personality onto this, but when you said that it was sort of merchandising 101, was there must have been a little bit of nervousness with going back to Eddie Bauer, because your last experience there hadn't been so positive. When you look back on it now, it seems as though it was particularly good judgment to come back into an area
maybe luck,
but also good judgment, where you kind of come back into an area where what they desperately need is something you can provide fairly easily. And did that kind of cross your mind, or was that just another good accident? Or
I don't know that it was an accident at that point, mainly because I clearly had done the homework in terms of the self-awareness that it took to know what I wanted in a job. I had trained myself or gotten some training from someone in terms of the online piece. I knew that online was the right thing. And I had come to the conclusion throughout that whole process that Eddie Bauer actually was a good fit for me. So I think that what I had to look at when I was contemplating whether or not to go back was, is this the right position? Because we already knew that it was the right kind of company. And now it was really just time to see if this position fit. And knowing what I knew about the person I was going to be working for, knowing what I knew about the position, it seemed like it was just something that could really have legs for me. Unfortunately, it has.
It did. Yeah.
So yeah, it's worked out very well.
What is your proudest accomplishment through these past 3 years?
Oh. I think probably just what our team has been able to achieve in building our web business. When I think back to, you know, coming back and being in that division, and Eddie Bauer really being a pioneer in online retailing, and at the time, all the talk was, you know, well, the .coms are going to win, and you know, you people that have other channels, you're not going to be able to figure it out. Well, if you look at what's gone on over the course of the last year or so,
you showed them.
Yeah, clearly, being a brand that people trust and being a retailer that has infrastructure in other areas is a key point of strength. And when I just look at, you know, I think anybody who's been involved in a web business, while it might look easy on the outside, I take that as the ultimate compliment in that it is incredibly difficult to do on the inside, not only from a business philosophy and customer interface point of view, but on the technical side as well. And I'm continually in awe of what our team's accomplished over the last 3 years. So I think the whole thing, really, to answer your question.
Right. What are some of the biggest challenges that you face?
Oh, wow. Lots of them. I think that clearly, I think the thing that we face day in and day out that's the most challenging is just staying focused and keeping priorities set. When you're in a business that's really in hyper-growth mode, the way most online businesses are today, there are so many opportunities and so many good opportunities that you know are going to get you return on investment, and yet you have a limited pool of resources, limited time. You really need to be setting priorities very, very carefully and reevaluating them all along the way. And I think that the thing that myself and the people that I work very closely with continually struggle with is, do we go here or do we go there? Because we clearly can't do both.
Now, I know that you had 6 months of this hyper-technical experience, but that still doesn't make you a technical guru by any stretch of the imagination. You're very dependent on the technology people in order to execute what you do. How do you earn their respect?
I think by respecting them. I guess that's probably the best short answer I can give you. No, we clearly could do nothing if it were not for their technical expertise. And I think that actually, when I think about the thing about my job that I really enjoy the most, one of those things, and there's a lot of things, but one of the things is being able to work with those people. I've learned an enormous amount, and I think the thing that's really fun is taking a business objective or a business idea and being able to translate it and formulate it in such a way that a technical person will understand it and be able to execute it and then share in the wealth when something does well. So that's probably the real linchpin to my position and a lot of the people that work on my team.
How would you describe your management style?
I tend to operate primarily on the philosophy of hire very good people and put them in place, give them some strategic guidance and let them go, and then rein back in if things are going a little bit too awry. But I tend to be a fairly hands-off manager that gives people a fair amount of freedom to find their way of accomplishing a particular goal.
Do you think it's more important to manage up, manage down, or manage laterally, and where do you think you're strongest?
Oh, I think it's important to do all three, actually. And it really depends on the circumstances and what you're trying to get done. I think that maybe the short answer is good communication across all levels is really what's important in being successful. How much you manage down really depends on the team that you have reporting to you. If they're strong people that are fine being left alone, then that's great. If they need a little bit of hand-holding and training in the beginning, I think that the tough part is always knowing exactly when you let the bird fly, exactly when you let them go. Managing across is absolutely critical. I don't think I could get a thing done if I didn't manage across and have a really strong peer group. And managing up is very important in that the people above you really need to understand how difficult it is to do what you do, and really help you prioritize and keep things in check.
Because it all looks really easy from a distance, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And where do you think you're strongest in those three?
I actually, the people you talk to might be able to answer that question, but I think that I probably feel the most comfortable when managing across.
Okay. Which skills that you have do you think have been most important to your success?
I think fundamentally written and verbal communication, and that sounds very general, but in the end I think that technical skill and operational skill is very important, but it changes all the time. And if you have the aptitude to learn that sort of thing, you're going to be fine. I mean, you might spend weeks and weeks and weeks in a class learning how to do something, and the technology will likely be obsolete within a couple of years. So learn how to learn, I think, is the important thing. But in the end, being successful, at least in the jobs that I had, has in the end been all about being able to communicate with people well.
Where do you find that you're weak, and what do you do to negate those characteristics? This is like an interview. Right?
Yeah, it really is. That wasn't
like a job
prepared for
interview.
that one.
You should always be prepared for that one. That's always one of the job interview questions.
Well, I think that usually the thing that you consider a weakness is something that stems from a strength. It's usually something that you do too much of, or something like that. I think that the thing that has occasionally gotten me into trouble is that I tend to embrace new ideas very, very quickly and very enthusiastically, and I have an enormous amount of passion for what I do. And as I was talking to you about the priority situation, it can mean potentially overextending yourself, potentially taking on one too many good ideas, and potentially self-destructing because you have just way too much on your plate and you can't do it well. So trying to keep focused and asking the people around me to help me keep focused is usually the best way to combat that.
And along with that, how do you handle stressful situations?
Depends on the situation. Usually, if it's a stressful situation, like there is a huge deadline coming in, we have an enormous amount of work to get done, it's usually organizing what needs to be done, getting people organized, and really almost at an obsessive level, digging in and doing very, very quickly. I have a tendency in very stressful situations to potentially sort of dive down and become very tactical as opposed to staying at a strategic level, because I'm usually assessing and thinking, where am I going to be the most useful to get through this? I need to help actually do it instead of just stand and direct the battle. So that can be a good thing or a bad thing depending on the situation. So I think that's probably the best answer I can give you there.
In the past 3 years, have you ever been tempted to leave Eddie Bauer?
No.
Invited to? Yeah.
Yeah.
But not tempted.
The job market would say that, yeah.
Have you ever found any special challenges in being a female executive?
No, I don't think so. Well, certainly not at Eddie Bauer. There have been times in my life dealing with people in other companies or in other parts of my personal life where you think, that wasn't too appropriate a situation, but I've never faced it professionally. It's just hasn't been an issue, fortunately.
Because retail tends to be a fairly female-centric kind of profession, but now that you're on the website, it seems like that shifted a bit.
Yeah, it's very balanced, much more gender balanced actually in our division than it is in other divisions of the company. And I think the technology side certainly has a lot to do with that. And I really enjoy that piece of it. And I think that if I look at, I'm probably one of the oldest people in a very young division, because a lot of where the real energy that's happening in retail is at the technical side, where a lot of really smart, talented young people are starting to enter the field, which is I think terrific. But no, being a woman has never been an issue.
Do you have any advice for the women in our audience about how to manage sort of heading towards those senior ranks?
I don't know that it would be advice for the women. I think it would be advice for everybody, and I don't know if it's even advice that's really needed. But I think that the thing that I would tell anybody about to embark on a career is to just keep self-awareness top of mind, in that throughout your career you're probably a lot of people are going to suggest things to you. You know, you would be good at this, or we have an opening over here and we need somebody good, so why don't you come over here? And it's very easy to sort of just get pushed around a little bit in your career, or perhaps pigeonholed in something that you don't particularly enjoy. And I think that the self-awareness process really needs to be ongoing, that you might know today when you're in college what you want to do, and that might look very, very different 5 years from now or 10 years from now. And the one thing I think that I've learned that hopefully has come across here tonight is that that being self-aware and knowing what you want to do and approaching your career in a much more directed fashion is clearly the way to be more successful. And I look at it as something that I'll be doing for the rest of my working life.
You told me that one of the best decisions that you'd made was to get a liberal arts education. Why was that so valuable to you?
I think that it comes back to the communication thing that we were talking about earlier, and that I went to a very, very small school where the class size was about 5 to 7 people on average. All exams were essay written, lots of term papers, a lot of oral examination, where if you hadn't done the work, it was very clear you hadn't done the work. And I think that in the end, I probably could have pursued a business career or something like that. It was not what I was interested in at the time. And when I look back now at what's valuable in the job market, or what's helped me in my job, it's being a generalist, being able to communicate, speak well and write well, and being able to solve complex problems effectively. And I think that I would credit my education to a lot of that.
You'd also said that one of your worst decisions was not continuing your education, not getting an advanced degree. How do you assume that that would have helped you?
I don't know that it would have helped me in my career. In fact, it may have sent me in a completely different direction. But I've always loved being in an academic environment and would like to be in one again as soon as I can. Just being in school from the time I was very small all through college was really what I love to do. And I think that's probably why I'm happy in my job now, and in that it is one that we're continually learning about every day.
It was a little intimidating at first, a sophomore working with so many PhDs. In the lab, I studied an infectious bacterium that is a major killer of people with HIV. I showed my data to Professor Cangelosi, and we realized I had made a new discovery.
Wow.
If this drug-resistant bacterium can be treated, people with HIV will have a better chance of surviving this infection. It's pretty overwhelming to think that I can have a part in helping millions of people.
I'm learning to care for prostate cancer patients at a UW teaching hospital.
I study cancer cells from those same patients in the lab.
Being able to study the disease, care for patients suffering from it, and research new ways to diagnose it helps me to see the whole cancer care picture. I'm researching a way to isolate a patient's cancer cells. Then we can determine how to treat them effectively and increase a patient's chances of survival. That would be so exciting.
Was your decision to leave J. Jacobs affected at all by the fact that they were having economic troubles?
Actually, at the time I left, they weren't having economic troubles. It tells you how long ago that was. I think they were starting to have some tough business, but the years that I worked there, their business was actually pretty good.
Okay.
So it was really more the opportunity at Bauer than it was wanting to leave there at the time. So.
And the second question is, I know you said that you don't do a lot of the technical stuff right now, but is there any particular skill that you have learned that you have felt has helped you in that department?
Yeah, I think that really what it's come down to for me is the communication with those people. And I think that it's really easy to be very intimidated by somebody who has a lot of technical skill. In fact, I see people come into our division all the time who are like, oh, but I don't know how to do it. Well, it's really easy to get intimidated and just sort of block that out and toss things across the wall to the technical people and hope you get what you want, but you never get what you want that way. Right. So I found what I really had to do was form a very, very close partnership an alliance with the technical team. And the person who's my counterpart on the technical side is, he's a terrific business partner. And we've learned a lot from each other because I've embraced his world and he's embraced mine. And that's the way you make things successful. So I think that I've learned a lot about technology because I've had to be successful. But it's really been my relying on him and respecting him to tell me, how do I get here from a business standpoint? Help me get there. And that's really what's worked for me.
Okay, thank you.
I work as a web developer for another large local Northwest company, and I wanted to know maybe what's the biggest change that's occurred at Eddie Bauer in web marketing in maybe like the past 6 months, and maybe what's on the horizon for the future, what's going to be coming up?
Well, I think the biggest change that's happened is that obviously the industry has changed in the last 6 months or so, and there's less players out there, which presents a really interesting opportunity for tri-channel retailers to sort of grab a little bit of extra market share, which is a good thing. The other thing that's happened is that retail business across the board, whether it be on the web or in brick and mortar stores or in catalog, has taken a bit of a downturn as well. And that means that everybody really has to tighten belts a bit and really focus on basics. And I think that where we are right now clearly is pretty much in that mode, that we're making decisions based on what our customer tells us they want, as opposed to some of the flashier things that were going to get us instant PR buzz. We're not necessarily going there. We're really focusing more on the basic things where we know we're going to get ROI. And I learned a long time ago never to predict the next 6 months in online commerce, because you're never right. So I don't know that I'll go there, but.
Okay.
Being an Eddie Bauer enthusiast and also a father, I'm curious why Eddie Bauer waited so long to get into Eddie Bauer for Kids. And also, I wanted to know, do you have any plans to expand the website for Eddie Bauer for Kids?
Kids is a brand new business for us. We actually just launched it in October of this year, online only. And it's been a really good thing.
It's catalogs too, though, isn't it?
A little bit in catalogs. We have done some
like
of the outerwear pieces.
Something.
Yeah, some of the outerwear pieces appeared in catalog, and it was really the success of that led us to introduce it as an online business. And yeah, I mean, we're monitoring that business very, very closely and do plan to carry it forward. It's one of those things that we've had that customer base for a really long time that wants kids product, and it was really just the right time when we had the money to invest and we're really ready to go for it. And that's one of the things that online has really presented to us in terms of opportunity, is the cost of the investment in a new business online is much, much lower than it would be certainly in stores or in a catalog, because you don't have to buy as much inventory and you can really monitor things and change things as you need to. So it's a good incubator for a new business like that.
The University of Washington Business School, located in Seattle, Washington, ranks among the top business schools in the United States. Information Technology Leaders is one of the many ways the UW Business School forges partnerships and reaches out beyond the university. For more information about the University of Washington Business School or Information Technology Leaders, visit informationtechnologyleaders.com.
I'd like to close with a composite quote. Sally is extremely intelligent, headstrong, fiercely independent, and always dependable. She is grace under pressure. She's a tough negotiator because she doesn't get emotional, but always focuses on facts and logic. She makes her decisions the same way. She listens to all the factors, rationally determines an appropriate course of action, and rarely gets swayed. You sure know where you stand. She believes in herself, but she's proved herself, so she has something to believe in. She's always her own person, and she's my role model. Thank you so much for sharing the history with us. Thank you.